Let me tell you a little about Sibyl, a girl Siegfried was keen to introduce me to. She was well known to him, and was the daughter of another witness couple, who were not only extremely strict with her, but also exceptionally fanatical in their belief. I had a very distinct feeling about some form of connection, if not a relationship, which might have developed between Siegfried and Sibyl, but since I was not to know or question that, I pretended I never guessed what the nature of the situation was. Nothing untoward was spoken, and Ruth made no comments about it. Remember, the witnesses follow a two-witness rule to prove anything, and the victims are the only ones punished. It seemed that I was simply better off not knowing anything in regard to that issue. My impression was that they were hoping and ardently desiring that I would start a relationship with her. They believed that it would help Sibyl greatly, and her mental health would improve, while at the same time Siegfried would be off the hook, and hopefully I would not realize. There were times they picked the girl up and left us together for a while, to see what might develop between us. I felt like a test subject in a laboratory, but could not be persuaded. Sibyl was suffering from manic and schizophrenic depression, and her parents, being strict witnesses, did not help her. Sometimes she was happy, and at others completely depressed, in a dull coma. The parental treatment of her was tragic. For instance, when she chose to read a fashion magazine, it was immediately snatched out of her hands and replaced with Watchtower or Awake ones. These magazines contained major study guidelines when witnesses conducted their Bible studies. This attitude had apparently continued with her parents since her childhood. She dared not even associate with friends outside what they considered as the truth. Eventually she needed professional treatment for her depression and personality conflicts. Her parents and the other witnesses liberally spoke about the reasons for Sibyl's condition being due to the evil practice of psychology. They believed their daughter was hypnotized by the evil medical doctors, causing her mental breakdown. Apparently those wicked doctors were spreading an evil word about the parents with their cultist belief, causing their daughters ill. Her parents would never accept responsibility, and indeed were incapable, helping Sibyl with all their restrictions and fanaticism. Interestingly, the Straubachs, like many other witnesses, were aware of her condition, but would never admit to it. Maybe they meant well by thinking that if they could match her with me, it would help her, but no consideration was given to me. How could they be so sure about our future happiness? Whenever I walked with her in a park, she was happy to tell me all about her problems and parental nightmares. Sometimes she would laugh hysterically or cry bitterly out of the blue. At times she would pick a little flower and insistently ask me to smell it. Then she would ask what it reminded me of. I could not begin to guess what it should remind me of. She would laugh and say, "It is the same smell like my, silly." It seemed I was once again being educated, perhaps in a very Germanic way. It saddened me a lot. She could be helped by medical science, but her parents adamantly preferred not to allow her to have any treatment, believing that if they ardently prayed to the good Lord Jehovah, she would be healed. nothing was happening, and the good Lord was not hearing their prayers. Maybe she was going to be well after Armageddon, when people became perfect as their Father God. Sybil was a good pianist, and could play perfectly well by simply recalling what she had heard. During a recital she was to perform a few classical pieces, but immediately after playing the first few notes, she stopped and started to laugh hysterically, then cried rather loudly, causing concern within the audience. Siegfried was extremely keen for me to be befriended with her, often talking to me privately about what a lovely girl she was, and that if I could build a friendship, she would get better. Even when we were at the local sauna, he was very insistent, and that made me conclude that there was an important concern on his part which he needed to cover up. Ruth, on the other hand, was more understanding, and when she asked me about what I thought of Sybil, I told her what I had observed, and that it would not be of benefit to any of us if I accepted her as my girlfriend, let alone marrying her as Siegfried was hoping. Nothing further needed to be discussed. Sadly, many months later we learned that she had committed suicide by hanging herself in the bedroom. Nevertheless, her parents still continued to blame medical science. There is much more to that story, such as her parents' totally unreasonable fanaticism and perhaps even interference by other witnesses. In their religiously manipulated wisdom, they might have meant well. This is a very sad story, and I'm happy that I was not involved with her. Even today, I wonder how medical science could be considered as devil worship, while Sybil collecting certain flowers from the fields to attract the sexual feelings of the opposite gender was not considered as a form of witchcraft, for such behavior has always been considered as evil by the witnesses. Consider how many innocent people have been murdered, heresy and witchcraft, based on false accusations in the name of Christ during the Dark Ages. Even today, it is regarded a great sin by certain cults to practice herbalism. I was shocked by this real-life story, but no longer wished to dwell on it. Sybil's entire life had not been anything other than parental abuse in the name of the true God Jehovah, while her parents were considered as truly faithful witnesses. Because of their great faith in Jehovah, they forever disciplined her, chastised her, shouted, and severely punished her for her disobedience to the Lord's organization, and prayed that the good God's angels would heal her, if it was His will. Her parents believed that they were doing the most righteous deed, so that their daughter, who they loved so much, could live with them everlastingly in the new world. And therefore she needed no medical treatment, as the faithful Lord would look after her. In short, the devil-worshipping psychologists were apparently making her very ill, and her early death was due to those evildoers practicing black art. I was told that her story was made into a film, and I really hope so. At least I was not blamed for not furthering any relationship with Sybil, let alone marrying her as Siegfried had hoped. Ruth, on the other hand, showed no sign of being supportive of such an engagement. They had no idea that I was spending time with another girl, Ulla, who I met through the courses I was doing. My connection with her was perhaps more platonic, but I could further the relationship if I desired. She was keenly interested, conversing with others who also showed some interest in her. I was unwilling to drift into a situation where jealousies could become an issue, and instead concentrated more on my studies. She was studying the same subjects as me, but I preferred to remain as just good friends. I had the distinct feeling that she could be a permanent and trustworthy friend. I often traveled with the Strohbachs to different places around Kirchheim Tech, visiting Siegfried's relatives, his sister and mother, who was an extremely shy woman, never wanting to be photographed. We shared river cruises with them, visiting Ruth's relatives, mother and sister, and shared a very provincial, farm-style living with them. None of them were Jehovah's Witnesses, although both Siegfried and Ruth were hoped to convince them of the truth of the cult they adhered to. We spent some time traveling to the ancient city of Ulm, Frankfurt am Main, and surroundings. Some of those trips have been no more than to attend special witness assemblies, but my interest has always been the townships and cities with their colorful historic backgrounds. Whenever we traveled to France, you can guess how happy I felt. I was home. The people, music, food, and cultural historic sites, as well as typical French provincial lifestyles, took me back home, and I never wanted to let go. Alas, this was just a holiday, and I had study to undertake and things to learn, but at least visiting Paris and other parts of my beloved France from time to time was helpful to forget some of the troubling days of the past. We spent quite a while in Paris and visiting interesting areas, from Gare du Nord to Pigalle, from Élysée to Eiffel, was still so exciting. Besides, my previous application for the Faculty of Medicine in Paris was very promising to further my studies. Apparently, when the Strohbachs had previously visited this great city, Ruth had been waiting for her husband somewhere she did not know well, and was approached by some gentlemen for services hoped from prostitutes. Later they were informed about certain spots in Paris which were reserved for girls looking for clients, and where she happened to be unawares. Siegfried laughed hysterically about it. Whenever in Paris, Siegfried was very keen to visit the witnesses' headquarters and printing facilities, desirous of introducing me to them. We spoke about conscription issues some young witnesses were facing in France, and were currently troubled with the law. We visited shopping arcades and the metro, and listened to partially protest songs of some youths on the streets, while taking photographs. Our visit to Normandy, Saint-Michel, and Saint-Malo was divine, and the weather fantastic. We had camping trips using our tents, but at night it was often very cold and humid. This was also where I met a young French lady, and we became close friends. Later, we corresponded with each other and agreed to meet from time to time. However, Ruth was annoyed with a young Armenian gentleman who was apparently pestering her, considering him an annoying slime. But his mother was very friendly. As Siegfried discovered around Saint-Malo and Saint-Michel, one had to be cautious when parking one's car at the beach, for there was a chance to lose it under the waves. The ebb and flow can often be extreme. At night Paris had a different character, and visiting places like Moulin Rouge was special. It took one's mind off the normal everyday concerns of life. No matter what part of the city one visited, it always remained home to me. We also visited Switzerland and did some climbing in the Alps. Doing so by the Jungfrau was fun, as one can imagine. At the Schwabach's request, we frequented another witness assembly at the sports ground in Basel for a few days. I was accommodated by a Swiss father and son who were not witnesses. Sitting down and listening to repetitious lectures was extremely boring, but my visit to this wonderful alpine country was a great experience. I still remember the time when on our way to Basel. At one stage we stopped to ask for directions from a young lady walking on the empty streets. She screamed frantically, running away, probably thinking we were about to abduct her. How sad. However, life went on with work and lots of studying.